Hi there, it's Sasha Varlamov here, creator of Coding Rooms, and I'm joined today by Barry Lindler from the Dutch Fork High School. He's an AP computer science teacher with over 20 years of teaching experience. And today we'll be talking about teaching AP computer science A and principles hybrid during the pandemic. Barry, would you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. As Sasha said, I'm Barry Lindler. This is my 25th year teaching. I've always been in Lexington, Richland 5, and Dutch Fork High School 23 of those 25 years. I teach computer programming 1 and 2 and AP Computer Science A, as well as AP Computer Science Principles.
Awesome. And when you got started teaching, did you start out as a computer science teacher?
No, sir. Actually, I started out, I have a math degree, so I started teaching mathematics in the middle school. I decided, within 2 hours, I did not like middle school, but I did finish that year and had some outstanding principals and buddy teachers. And our district was opening an alternative school. And so I was invited to go there to teach math and anything else I wanted to teach. I had an interest in programming. So I started a programming class. We just started some very simple web page HTML stuff. And it grew from there. I stayed at the alternative school for 2 years, and then Dutch Fork asked me to come and bring the program here. So I came here and been teaching full-time coding ever since.
I see. And today, which courses do you teach?
I do teach computer programming 1, that's in Python, AP Computer Science A, which is in Java, AP Computer Science P, which this year I'm teaching in Python. Last year it was in Swift. And then Computer Programming 2 Honors, which is our 4th course. Same thing. This year it's in Python. Last year it was in Swift.
Mm-hmm. I see. And you've been teaching for a while. How has teaching changed for you? And I'm sure probably a little more this year than others, but it'd be really interesting to know how far have we come?
Absolutely. Man, it's amazing how far we've come. I keep in touch with a lot of my students. In fact, I don't know if you can see on the wall back there, those mugs. My students go to college and they bring me a mug back sign for the wall to kind of, just a way to keep in touch and let us know how they're doing. And so in talking with them and talking to them how we came through this same program, even though the language has changed and the theory is still basically the same, we do it differently than we used to. The biggest change now is that our students, their attention span is not shorter, it's broader. So what I feel like we've got to do with our teaching is we have to teach in much smaller segments, almost like tweets. You put all these pieces together, but they're just so pulled in so many directions that it's just really changed the whole theory of how we teach. But with that change is also some amazing tools to do what we've done in this last year. That just says a lot about society and how far we've come. That in our particular situation with my students, 2 days, and we already had a working model of what to do. It wasn't ideal, but we got it going. Everybody was comfortable with the platforms, and we just had to tweak and go. But now I see so many good things, ironically, that came out of what we've been through, that I see changes in education from here on out. I had students go out today. Some of them were for COVID reasons, but I have another few that are sick. But for them to not even hesitate, they just know as soon as they got home, they just need to sign in. Class has started, they know what time to be there. They know where the resources are. And in years past, we'd be getting emails or notes that someone's going to be out for a week and have to make folders and do handouts and do all that kind of stuff. And now everything is here. I can tweak assignments instantaneously. So if something didn't work first block, I can change it, and the next time I teach it, it's already better instantly. So there's a lot of neat things that have come out of the dramatic times we've just come out of, or are coming out of, hopefully.
I see. Yeah, that's great to hear. And you mentioned to me earlier before we started the podcast that you're moving to full face-to-face now, but for a long time you were full remote and then hybrid. Can you take us back to when that first started? So I guess March 2020.
Absolutely. When March hit and we were first starting to hear the rumblings here in South Carolina that that this was going to happen. We were already starting to panic some. I felt a little more comfortable with our programming students, but just knew that the accountability piece, you've got to constantly remember that anytime we are teaching them virtually, we are technically in their homes. So with their cameras and our cameras, we've got to be very mindful of the space that we're in. And so there was a lot of panic. There was also a lot of confusion of, not on the teacher standpoint, but for the district and the state, how do you hold them accountable when we couldn't guarantee services? And once we went through several weeks of that and kind of figured out that, man, there's no way to really hold them accountable. Your students that are in a situation at home where things are difficult, there's not an awful lot we could do remotely. So it kind of shut us down academically. We could still reach them as best we could, but holding them to the traditional standards was just not going to work. So many of us teachers, just like all the other teachers around the nation, spent April, May, June, July, knowing that August was coming. So we were redoing everything. I had ironically already committed to rewriting all of my curriculum before this hit. So I'd already kind of knew I was going to throw everything out. So it was a little bit easier for me. I knew I was kind of starting from scratch. But coming into August, things got a lot better. There were clear directives from our district and our state of what the expectations were with students. They were so comfortable with the meetings, we could relay and reinforce those standards that we were expecting for them. We found the communication piece was better. And so once our hybrid schedule started going, it really was almost the preferred model of many students, because what they felt like was happening is in the classroom of normally 25 or 26, there might be 10, maybe 15. So they got a little more one-on-one attention in that room. They didn't feel the pressure of other people that when there was that natural competitiveness, it felt a little bit better. And then I had the other half was on our screens. In my particular classroom, I've got large screen TVs in the middle, kind of set up like rows. So they sit around and look at the content that way. So my virtual students, the ones at home, were on all these monitors everywhere. And after a week or two, they just started feeling comfortable having conversations with the monitors. And you would just be teaching and you'd hear a voice in the ceiling, you'd recognize who that voice was. And like I said, they kind of preferred the hybrid model. They could have days at home and they could work at their own pace for other classrooms. They didn't feel like they had to just be sitting in that traditional environment. And if they wanted to designate a whole day for programming or for English or whatever, they could. It would just work better with their schedule. And then as we slowly transitioned to, we went to 4 days a week with everybody in place. To be honest, it was a little stifling because of the distance recommendations of trying to keep people 6 feet apart. When you put 20 to 25 students in the classroom, they can't really move around. It eliminated group work. So what was an advantage is now a disadvantage, because now all of a sudden my students were in the room and I had a small pocket of students still taking courses virtually. So I'd have 4 or 5 or 6 on the monitors, then the other 20 or 21 sitting in the rooms, and they couldn't move around. So we needed something to kind of mimic that virtual environment. We were using some good online platforms that helped us through the spring. They worked pretty well for the fall, but just wasn't exactly what we needed. And then we came across coding rooms, and coding rooms is really what allowed us to kind of treat that in-person as if it was still hybrid and virtual. And so when students were home for sick or quarantine or whatever, or if they were in class, they could still basically be in that hybrid environment. They could be grouped up virtually. They seem to prefer that. It's certainly much easier to share code and to have discussions about code, not huddled around a laptop, but looking at a screen of shared environments. So coding room really helped us through that. And now we've got a flow going. Sasha, you and I were talking earlier about how today was one of our exam days, and just because of the workflow with coding rooms, the students knew what to do. Everything was very smooth and seamless. And I ironically had 4 students called out of class today for quarantine issues. They were literally pulled out of the room, and they were texting me and emailing me on the way home. I'll be home in 5 minutes. We'll sign in. And they just popped right in. And because of that environment, we're able to pick right up on the exam and keep right on going. Had a student that had some problems. He was able to stay right after lunch. Had some advanced students that came in. They popped into the live classroom with him, and it worked very, very well. Sorry, that was a long answer to say that we've come a long way. And I'm really excited again about the opportunities that coding rooms and this experience has given us. It's given us the confidence that we can now pretty much teach anywhere. You just give us an internet connection, we'll be good to go.
That's awesome, and it's really exciting to hear. Not only how new tools like coding rooms have helped you in this transition, and we're really proud that you're enjoying coding rooms, and it's helping you in the classroom and with the hybrid element as well. But also how students have coped with it. I myself took AP Computer Science A when I was in high school, which was Java, and or still is in Java, and I'm still sometimes I think what would it be like for me if I were a high school student, say a sophomore, junior, senior, going through all of this, and how challenging it would be, and to see how I mean, practically all the things you've mentioned would be impossible if students weren't hyper cooperative, right? And it sounds like you have a really, in maybe in some regards, very lucky district, equipment wise, preparation wise, leadership, and everything. But do you think that student aspect is also really important?
Absolutely. A thing, our district does several things well, and I'm again very fortunate that we are in the situation that we're in. Our district consistently ranks top of the state and competes nationally for recognition. Our STEM honors program is one of the best in the nation. I think it was voted the 14th best in the nation just last year. So we've got an amazing environment. And years ago, they made the commitment one-to-one devices to our students. We started off with iPads, and now we use Chromebooks primarily because of elementary and middle needing a little more of that keyboard input. But so we were there. So when this happened, the only challenge we had left was we needed help from the state to make sure everybody had an internet connection. But the students bought into it. They've gotten over that initial rush, and teachers that have been through it know that that first year of having a one-to-one device, your teachers are your biggest hurdle, because they've got to accept that answers are already right there at their fingertips. If they're using an electronic device, you can't ask them to regurgitate information, but that transforms your teaching. And in programming, that's what we've always done. I've always said syntax is secondary. We can get the logic and the theory, that's what we got to fight. We'll always be able to figure out the syntax. And now actually that has helped us. What we're doing, and since we just made the switch to Python, we don't know it all, but somebody instantly can look up, okay, what's the syntax for this? And then it lets us dig into deeper theory. But the student buy-in is key, and them feeling so comfortable with the technology, and that our school also is very consistent in their expectations of teachers. So the experience for each student is the same academically, room to room. The assignments are in the same format, and in the same environment. We use Google Classroom. We even name and number our assignments in a consistent way so that students have that same feel. So it's just second nature to them. It's just like texting. They just pop in, get into Google Classroom, and then go wherever they need to go.
That's awesome. I think that coordinated effort and consistency is, I don't want to say understated, but challenging, and I think it's something that unfortunately a lot of schools are still struggling with, especially with all the change. But it sounds like that has really helped you and your students adjust to this, right?
It has, and again, for a programming environment, it's kind of neat to be able to use real life to say, this is why we have protocols. When we have students come in and then remind them, you knew exactly what to do for English class because we have this protocol for the whole building. Everybody does it the same way. The same reason we have protocols in coding. Why we have to follow PEP 8 guidelines. There's a reason for that. And they see it. They see it firsthand, especially when a teacher doesn't follow. those protocols.
Mhm. And for those of us who aren't Python engineers, can you explain what PEP8 is?
Basically a set of standards. Everybody agrees to this is the way you're going to have a blank line in front of a function, and you're going to name them with all lowercase, separated with underscores, so that that you don't have to look that stuff up. You can again get back to work because everything else is expected.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, it's really exciting to hear about that element of student buy-in, which is of course sort of non-trivial to attain.
Yes, sir.
So
Not to hijack your conversation, but my students were very instrumental in us choosing coding rooms. We were using Replit, we used JDoodle, we've used just teaching PyCharm, IntelliJ, just broadcasting through Google Meet. And I value the opinions of my third and fourth year students. I mean, they've been with me all this time, and they know what they went through, and they know what we're going through together. And so we make these decisions together. And so they saw the same need that I did. And when I came across some information about coding rooms, and Joe Mazzone was a big helper and give me some additional information, but I saw your information originally through some posts on Facebook. And then I brought it in here and said, y'all, this looks great. Let's look at it. And so we sat in here and started digging it apart. So their needs and they're willing to speak up about it was key on us deciding on this platform for us.
that's awesome to hear. Definitely that student-led element is something that I really love hearing about, for sure. On the AP side, so you teach both AP CSA and AP CSP.
Yes, sir.
I sort of myself am not as familiar with AP CS principles. Maybe we can get started with, do you use coding rooms for the AP CSP students?
I don't use it as much for CSP. Computer science principles, the principles course is kind of an introductory course. Many schools use it as the first course before. Many schools use computer science principles as the first course before they go on into computer science A. In our school, because of the nature of our students, I let them take principles whenever they want to, if they want to. There's a very small programming component. Most people consider it half of the course is programming. And the programming portion of the exam is extremely simple. It's more following directions, and it does a really good job on teaching them some fundamentals, but it doesn't go really deep into coding, because I don't have as much of a need for the shared environment that we had in coding rooms. And my particular population this year and last year for that course were students that already taught. So the programming part went quickly. And we had pretty much wrapped that up before I found coding rooms. I had decided, in case we went back into a quarantine situation, I switched and did all my coding in principles at the beginning of the year when I had them in person, because the rest of the course is easier to teach remotely. So for principles, I did not use it as much. We did use it for the exam, which turned out fantastic experience to have that ability to live watch each of their desktops and see them coding. We know from hovering over students' shoulders all these years, you can tell what a student knows by how they type information. And you kind of forget that in the virtual environment because it's so hard to see each screen. Many of those other environments I've mentioned, you could see one screen at a time, great, but to see them all, or to see a section of them, that's where the key was. And so to do it in the exam and literally be able to see where people hesitate, and the way coding rooms does over on the side, it shows you their last moments of activity and things like that, so you can really get a feel for what's going on in that student's mind. Now, where it really shines for us is AP Computer Science A. I teach that. We use an online curriculum called CSAwesome, which I highly recommend. It's fully supported by teachers. It's open source, and teachers are constantly contributing to it and keeping it running. It's fantastic curriculum, and they basically take each unit and break it down into small programming chunks, which is the way I've taught all along. I just didn't find this curriculum until quarantine. But that's perfect for what we do in encoding rooms. I had used Replit to simulate some of the things that she had in CSAwesome. And now we're using it in coding rooms, and students are giving me feedback. They prefer it in coding rooms. Our normal workflow is an assignment is in coding rooms, but then they go into the live classroom, and the live classroom is separate from the assignments. The way I like to think of it is like college. It's like the lecture part. Live classroom is the lecture area, and then you go to a lab to do the programming, but we just do that in tabs in the browser. So the students really like that live component. The CSAwesome curriculum is great because it's live coding right in the curriculum. You test it and run it and test it and run it. But to be able to do it together as a class and have those discussions, that's just the beauty of it. That sells me on this particular platform right away. But
Awesome.
that has really helped with AP Computer Science A. Anyone that teaches Computer Science A knows that they can learn so much reading, but like I tell my students all the time, you can't learn to swim without getting wet. You can read about swimming all you want to, and you can read about programming all you want to, but they have got to code. They've got to code, and this is just the perfect environment for us to keep an eye on them, especially those that are at home all the time and they don't get to see people. We need to have a little more interaction. And when they see me take control over their code, or I'm responding to them live as they're typing, it just really has them feel a lot more involved. They're not writing the curriculum, they're helping to drive the curriculum. And another thing I've noticed is since we started using the live classrooms, if I have students now that actually keep their microphone on the whole class, where they used to not do that because they would talk very little in the environment. But now that we're using coding rooms, they'll leave that microphone on and we just have live conversations the whole time.
Wow, that's awesome. I haven't heard about that last piece. That's really interesting. I haven't heard some folks mention that in the second, sort of the second COVID semester, if you will, which would have been the fall 2020 semester, that students in general were much more engaged with microphones, turning on cameras, and glad that embedded video conferencing environment helps with that as well.
It does, and with coding rooms, it allows that all to be in one unit. And it works fine with us. We are a Google district, so we use Google Meet, and that's fine. It just works for us so much better. And now, especially since y'all added the recording feature to it, that all that's just in one window. Everything we need is right there. But absolutely, students clearly feel more comfortable in the fall than they did in the spring, and we are the same way. Oh my goodness, none of us really care anymore. We used to Google Meet. I don't even know if I even brushed my hair. You know, we just turn on the camera and go. But back in the spring, you'd be dressing up because you're gonna be on camera all day. It was a big deal then. And now, you know, dogs barking, children pulling on your legs, whatever. It just life happens and the camera's on, and students are the same way. But we also have to keep in mind that there are students that want to be involved, that for whatever reason at home, whether they don't feel comfortable, maybe not even safe, they're not going to have their camera or their microphone on, but they're there. And there's another cool thing, that there was two students in particular I have, and still concerned about academically, but because of the way we're using coding rooms, and for me to see the little timeout feature, and I can see that they're a lot more present in the moment than I originally thought. It's just the camera and the microphone are off, but I can see them engage and disengage and engage and disengage. And I can't see that in the other environments. So for those students, that's priceless to have that kind of connection with us.
I see. Yeah, that's definitely a big thing that's come up. Some of our customers have mentioned that they use it as their attendance tool at the end. Like, you know, everyone's really good at, and this might be more of a problem in university and sort of in higher ed, where they used to sort of, you know, just do attendance at the beginning of class, right? But of course, everyone sort of just tunes in, clicks record, and, you know, goes on with their, you know, homework for the other class or whatever. But they were explaining that they actually take attendance at the end and then see the last active at and compare that against their class duration. And so if last active at is the beginning of the class, which means you just signed in, didn't actually participate in anything, then your attendance is gone, which was I thought was a really funny sort of use
That,
case for coding rooms.
that was our Wednesdays, just until this week, have been at home, and it's an abbreviated schedule. And I think the first or second week that I was using coding rooms, that's exactly what I did. I looked at that little tab and I just took me a little edited screenshot of it, did our attendance, put in my daily grades, and of course the emails start coming. I was in. So I could just send them the list and say, yep, it says you were in and you were inactive for 45 minutes. Or like you said, the last active was that first minute of class.
Mm-hmm.
And now I don't have that problem anymore.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, that's sort of a concrete improvement on engagement, if you will.
It is. It's as close as we can get to being with them if they're not here. And again, I still think it adds. It's ironic to say that, but it really does add more dimension into my regular classroom. I mean, my classroom's empty right now, but I kind of look out and see where kids are gathering, and because they're still connected because of live classroom and coding rooms, I feel like I'm in that circle. I'm in that circle as opposed to having to walk over and kind of hover over. And I don't know about you. Well, you wear glasses, so you know that it's hard to see those Chromebook screens, and it's not the best screen resolution to begin with. And so if you're trying to really get involved, you're just all up in what we call their COVID space, and we can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So this has just helped a lot.
I see. Yeah. So oddly enough, the idea for coding rooms came from when I was teaching various coding workshops, and I would stare out into all the sea of attendees and ask questions like, "Did everyone get that?" And then walk around and realize that no, most of you didn't get that, but there was still a lot of head nods, and sort of bridging that gap between the nodding heads and actually getting things done was that's what caused us to start thinking about, is there a way that we could actually connect that for educators?
And y'all started in 2017, is that right?
Yeah. So we originally started in 2017. I started working on sort of the technology behind coding rooms actually when I was in high school in 2015. So it has a pretty long history, but in terms of the coding rooms brand, we actually launched it in May of 2020, and we added video conferencing. And I think that was one of our big features that made it usable for today's environment. And we continue to, of course, support video conferencing into the foreseeable future.
Yes, sir. In my district, we're required to record the online meets. And so I was having to do that separately. So as soon as y'all added that, I was able to say, hey, I can just hit this record button too. That was really nice. So when y'all designed it, did you design the live classroom element first and you just supported one language at that time?
Yes, yeah, exactly. So we started out with just the live classrooms. And so in the past, basically year, we've added big features like the assignments library, some of the pre-built courses, all the auto grading stuff. And for those of you who've been kind of keeping up with the updates, know what's happening as far as the updated IDE. We're also working on things like plagiarism checking. So there's a extensive sort of product roadmap for this year that we're really tailoring towards people coming back and juggling this mixed environment, this hybrid environment, I should say, and that's what we're really excited about.
Well, and you mentioned a really good point, because I've had this conversation with other teachers. Two things. First is that what y'all are adding, that's how I spend my Sundays. I spend my Sundays getting ready, and recently it's been, what is Coding Rooms going to do for me this week? And so yesterday I spent a good bit of time using your unit testing and was able to really try that out heavily today, and it's worked great. But what I found that really helped us go forward is that you could feel that Coding Rooms was built from the ground up, thinking about classrooms, and you can feel the change coming. If I can steal those lyrics, and you just feel like that the best interest of the student is with this product. And it's interesting to think about when I talk to other teachers, what does next year look like? The vaccine holds and everything is great. What is next year? For me, it's not going to be flip a switch and go back to normal. Normal's not good enough for our students today. It's not good enough for us today, if we were being honest. Our needs have changed. And if my students are sitting beside a $1,400 iMac and they're using a $200 Chromebook and they prefer a Chromebook, then I've got to be thinking differently. And what we're finding out, or what we should have already known, is just like Apple used to say that the best camera is the one in your pocket. Well, it's turning out this is the best IDE. It's the one they can get their hands on the quickest. And if they are comfortable with working on a Chromebook, well, then we've got to fix it. We've got to make sure it works. And so I see a need for coding rooms well into the future. It's not, to me, just not a pandemic software package. It's something that I'm going to need to tailor my teaching from here on out. As districts embrace it, all they have to do is make sure we have a pipeline. It's going to drastically reduce their equipment overhead, because now I don't necessarily, don't tell the people that just bought me this Mac lab, but I don't actually need a whole Mac lab now anymore. It's nice to have the situation for some that want it, but if a majority of my students are going to be able to learn and learn well in this environment on a Chromebook or any Mac that they bring or whatever laptop they want, then why do I need to provide a lab? So this is stepping stone to the future, not just something to get us through this current pandemic.
Mhm. Yeah, certainly, certainly. I mean, a lot of the points you raised are really interesting. The equipment and sort of accessibility element is exciting in terms of helping, especially helping those districts that don't yet have the Mac lab. You know, because those folks, I sort of worry are the ones who will not have the opportunity to access or even be introduced to the world of computer programming. And
Yes.
there's plenty of initiatives that do introduce programming in some way to I would say probably nowadays is the majority of students in the United States. But it's okay if I get introduced to it, but I don't have a way to work on it, then there's only so much you can do, and quite frankly, there's only so much code you can write on your phone too. So you kind of need at least a tablet, and you know these are, I mean, unfortunately, still challenges that I think a lot of school districts are facing, and a lot of students. But it is exciting that this remote shift, I imagine, and from what we've been hearing, has helped really radically close that gap for people.
Yes, sir. Well, it's made us feel more comfortable. I was talking with a coworker just the other day, and years ago, when you talked about virtual class, I mean, that was a special lab. We were fortunate enough to have one in this building for a year or two, but a special lab with all these huge cameras and special lighting and sound. Now, this is your lab. You know, it's just right there in your hand or in that little Chromebook. And I'm not trying to get political, I'm not getting on the soapbox, but there's absolutely no reason in this country that a child can go to public school and has to do three things. They should not have to pay for internet, they should not have to pay for a Chromebook, and they should not have to pay for food. We can afford those three things.
Mhm.
And we've just shown because of that, if we have one of our districts down in the low country that is short a teacher, well, their students can call into my classroom. Or if I'm out sick, my students can dial into another school, because we're now comfortable with it, as long as we make sure they have those basic necessities.
Mhm.
Sorry, that was a rant.
Yeah, I actually want to so there's two things I'm really interested to discuss. One is the CSAwesome, but the other is what you just mentioned right now about essentially that model of like a remote instructor for an in-person classroom. So let's say school A has a fantastic computer science teacher, school B down the road or maybe in the same county does not. for whatever reasons, budget, there's not enough enrollment, isn't able to support like a full computer science course. Do you think in the public school setting, it's possible that, let's say next year, we could have schools that have a remote computer science course that's taught by like a satellite school?
Absolutely, without a doubt. And my administrators around here get tired of hearing me say this, but if we go back to March, so our last full week with students was the first week in March. The next week we were closed down. The very next week we were feeding every kid in the district all the meals they needed. We could do that in less than a week. Then we can do this. Um, what I would need if I was that teacher, I would need an assistant, and it could be a student assistant. It could be an internship with a high school student, and the room that was receiving it would just need an adult supervisor, and it would be great if they had just some kind of mentor student that could just answer a few questions. But with those things in place, absolutely. Um, and in the long run, we would save money because that funding cost, we all know that the biggest expense in any school is the people, but that's the most valuable part of the school too. But if we can find a way to stretch that talent a little bit and give them the support that they need so that we don't burn them out, absolutely, it could be done for the fall without question.
Mm-hmm. I see. Do you think there are any regulatory or otherwise sort of hurdles to this being possible? Because I think the latest data, right, is that fewer than 50% of U.S. schools actually have any form of computer science being
Really?
taught, right?
Less than
This is
50%.
the like latest research that I'm able to find.
Okay.
This is a code.org and Google survey. I think I can pull it up here if we're interested, but from 2018. So granted that's 3 years old. Hopefully we've made some progress, and there's sort of no doubt about that. But one of the key themes has always been the challenge of hiring computer science teachers as being sort of the limiting factor, the bottleneck, if you will, on deploying computer science courses more widely in U.S. schools. And so this idea that we're talking about, this remote potential for having remote instructors basically dial into schools, would hopefully alleviate that in a big way. Because the way I understand it is a lot of comp sci teachers don't have a full course load because there's not enough students who are ready or willing, interested in yet taking that full comp sci class, and schools aren't willing to make it not a general education credit. What's the word? Like a common credit. So you kind of have this challenging issue that arises, right? But I wonder, is there anything structurally that would prevent this from happening?
Regulation wise, I would not think so, because especially in our state, we allow virtual school. And this to me is better than virtual school. I think a lot of people think of the old model of virtual school as a live instructor all the time, when it's really just distance learning. It's really just curriculum, and you check in with somebody and they answer some questions. But with this new model that we're seeing, we're talking about live direct instruction. And I think that would be valuable. The only other hurdle I could see is again, the body in the room of the remote location. That's a huge hurdle for education, is bodies, getting those bodies in there. And that's, there's a cost associated with that. And if you don't meet the cost, you don't have the labor to show up to help you with it. So those would be the biggest thing I would think is finding is being willing to pay the price a year or two, but understanding that my personal feeling is it would save us money in the long run. And then it's a great equalizer. The other thing that you have, I'm the department chair for our CTE department here. And because of the nature of what we're in now, some of our CTE teachers are being exposed to curriculum they've never seen before. So where they thought, I can't do computer programming because they came through college and it was different. And they're actually seeing what it is, and they realize it's more of a mentor and support role, and that you're helping guide them through a curriculum like CSAwesome or stuff that the College Board puts out. And they see, wait, I can do that. You know, that's what I'm doing in my engineering class, but I'm just doing it a little bit differently. I can do that. And so now by having these remote locations, I think it would help expose teachers to get them out of their comfort zone and say, I really can. This is not the basic I learned in college. This is not Pascal and Fortran. This is stuff that's instant results, and this is fun. This is the problems the students want to solve. So I see it as a win-win all the way around. I just don't know if we have enough people with the courage to try it. That's my hope, is that we do. And I'm very encouraged. I love my district, and you talk about somebody that leads the way. Our district will attempt to lead the way every opportunity it can, and it's a struggle for us. Um, so I just hope that this is something that we're working towards.
I see. Yeah, I definitely see that as at least kind of when I brainstorm these things. This is one that consistently comes to the top in terms of how do you deliver meaningful CS education beyond the existing walls of schools that can basically can afford to implement a CS curriculum, have enough student interest in it. One other thing I really wanted to discuss with you was CSAwesome. So would you mind introducing that to folks who aren't familiar with CSAwesome?
Yes, I wish I was more familiar with it. I, like a lot of teachers, on up until last year, I just kind of did my own thing. Like you mentioned, um, I was kind of the only one around. It was hard to reach people. You didn't want to sign up for a weekend workshop, and then you meet people and you talk to them over email. That didn't work. And because I was the only one teaching 4 and 5 preps, and you're just exhausted. Well, when the pandemic hit and I was looking for support, I needed help. And I knew I was going to redo my curriculum. I stumbled across CSAwesome. Um, and it's awesome CS. What I like about it is that I honestly don't even know how it got started. It's part of the Runestone Academy, so it's part of that free ebook for all movement. Um, and there's a group of teachers that support it. They designed all the curriculum in it. It's very self-paced, or as I do it, it's class directed. But it's something that you could work through yourself. Um, you basically go in and say, I want this course. You get your own copy of it, and you can customize it if you choose to. What I'm doing this year is I'm not customizing it. If it's in there, I'm doing it just like it is, and I'm making my notes for the future. And at first glance, just like we always do, I look at it and think, some of these exercises, and that's why do they need 3 times to write a for loop? Well, because they really do need that kind of practice, and it's built into the curriculum, and they get the reinforcement. But they definitely need us behind it. I have some students that aren't as successful in there as I'd like them to, because they relied on, you just keep hitting it, it'll say, no, that's not right, and they eventually figure it out, but they don't really think it through. But now they understand. But it's a tremendous resource, and I sing its praises every chance I get. I use that, and for AP Computer Science A, I use Rosalind Tukolsky's Barron's review book. And between those two, if my students don't make a 5 on the exam, that's all on them.
I see. Awesome. So it'd be interesting to understand, how do you link these resources together? So you have CSAwesome, the APCSA sort of standards, right? The Barron's book, the prep book, and coding rooms, right? Is there any kind of glue or methodology that holds all this together?
Well, the glue for me is CSAwesome. They have done such a good job, especially with their examples. They're pulling out old pre-response questions from the College Board previous testing, and they're weaving it through that curriculum. So I use that as my driver. And what I do is I've gone through all the curriculum, got everything worked out, and then I fine tune based on what my students are needing. So I look at it, and if it's an opportunity to code, I try to pull it into another environment just so they're different, doing some different things. If they want to stay on their phone or Chromebook and just stay right in that environment, they can, or they can go over to coding rooms and do what I'm asking them to do. And then that allows us to have the conversation. We'll finish up most of that curriculum probably early March, and then we'll just kind of abandon that and just go Barron's book.
And end of the period, right?
So at the end of March, we'll be in the Barron's book, and we'll just hit that kind of hard and heavy. And that will be our review for the exam, and we'll be set to go first week in May. So CSAwesome is kind of what steers it, and then I'd branch everything else out of that.
Mm-hmm. How do you think, and so CSAwesome is a free and open source curriculum. How do you think it stacks up against some of the other popular curriculums, textbooks for AP Comp Sci?
I'm probably not the best person to ask that because I had decided years ago that I really wasn't crazy about a lot of the curriculum. I really loved Maria and Gary Littman's book, the Java Methods books. I used those, and then I just kind of designed my own curriculum, and that worked very well for me. But like I said, I'd already decided I was going to redo my curriculum anyway, because if we do the same thing over and over, we start shortchanging it. And so I was looking for something. CSAwesome is absolutely not perfect. We don't want anything to be perfect, or we don't have to work with it. But it's just that community, and I just feel like the consistency is there. Are there stronger books? Yeah. Are there books a little more college level? Absolutely. But as we have been talking about this whole hour, is we're looking for that equity piece, so that I feel like every one of my students can be successful with CSAwesome. That's not been the case with other textbooks. I've either felt like they've started out a little low and never stepped up, or they start out too high and never gave that other student a chance to get that there. But CSAwesome kind of ramps up and I think supports it through. And if it doesn't, I'll have it fixed for my class for next year. But so far, I've been just really pleased with it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. That's great to hear. And for CSP, do you use any other resources, or for your other comp sci classes?
For CSP, no, sir. I'm tentatively thinking about using either code.org for next year if we stay with the Python type environment. But I really would like to go back to Apple's curriculum, which is what I used last year, the Swift curriculum. The only reason I did not do it this year is, like I said, I wanted to go into the fall assuming we were going to be locked down. And with Apple Swift curriculum, they have to have Macs, and that wasn't all of my students. And so I didn't want anybody to feel disadvantaged. So I put it aside, even as much as I liked it and some of the students liked it. So right now, my plan is not to go back to it because we're going to be in the same situation next year. I can't guarantee that all of my students have access to that curriculum. As far as computer programming 1 and computer programming 2, this is probably news to you, but I'm planning on restructuring my computer programming 1 next year following y'all's Python tutorials that you put up in coding rooms. I like the way they go. I really like the fact that it's kind of like for further reading or additional tutorial stuff at the bottom of each one of those lessons. I really like that structure. And even though I might do some things differently, having that consistent structure, like we talked about, those protocols, I think is more valuable than me customizing a few things. So right now, that's what I'm planning on doing next year, is using y'all's Python tutorials that you have. And then computer programming 2, that's my 4th year kids. We just kind of do whatever. So I have a feeling we're going to just be digging heavy in Python. And if they're all Mac people, we'll do Swift for them next year.
Awesome. That's really exciting.
Yes, sir.
Excited to see the Python course. So actually, of the courses that you talked about, there's Java, Python, and Swift. So you teach in 3 languages.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's definitely a not non-trivial sort of issue, I think.
It's crazy. I've got one student, I have him the same day, just an hour and a half apart. So in the morning, he's with me in Java, and then right at lunch, he's with me in Python. And between the two of us, and he's one of those older ones I talked to about some other things. So we're constantly syntax. Oh my gosh, we just can't keep it straight. But again, it lets us talk about theory, and then we can always use it as a teaching tool for someone to correct a syntax. And I love Python, but it does make me kind of a lazy programmer sometimes.
Yeah, definitely hear you on that. Definitely hear you on that. Especially as someone who started in a more structured programming language. And I
Yes,
understand
sir.
what you mean.
And it's a debate with my older students whether that's whether that's the best thing to teach first. Yes, they can be more successful, but then is it going to be harder to teach the intricacies of a more syntax directed language or not? So my gut right now is telling me it's going to be fine. You know, our students are resilient. They'll be fine going Python first and then on to something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's becoming. I mean, personally, I wasn't a big fan of it, but I definitely am converting to it. I'm not a big Python person myself either, but it seems like literally, as you said, once you get those concepts down, you can kind of grok your way through syntax as you go. So
Absolutely. As your unit test showed me when I was running those with some sample students, I was trying to think of how bizarre of code could they write to fail. How bizarre could their code be to make this unit test fail? And you're right. I mean, Python, you can just, it's like duct tape and a pair of pliers. You can fix it. It might not be pretty, but you can fix it. And it worked great.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the educators watching this podcast?
Um, as far as teachers are concerned, oh my goodness, just hang in there. We're all exhausted, and like I've mentioned, one of the things that really keeps me going is like the students that came in today at lunch. They just, whatever was going on in the world, all they want to do was talk about coding. So that's great. And then there's that kid at home that still needs us, and no matter what, we might be the only positive adult role model they speak to today. And so we'll get through this. We'll have a short summer break. We'll catch our breath. We'll do it again in the fall. And we're just so thankful that there's companies like Coding Rooms and others that are doing things to help us, and have those conversations like I have with my students. Be willing to pay for something. We don't want everybody to strive for a price of zero, or our students won't have anybody to work for. So if it's something you like, pay for it. Like I've been talking about CSAwesome. I love that program, but it's free, but somebody needs to be making some money so it doesn't go away. And Coding Rooms needs to be making some money. So that's why we jumped on board. As soon as I saw it was a tool for us, I went to our admin and said, this is key, and it's less than the cost of a workbook that I'm going to throw away each year. So it's a perfect fit for us. So thank y'all for what you're doing for us.
Awesome. Glad to hear that. Really makes my day here. Awesome. Real quick, I always kind of wrap up the podcast with a few notes. So February 4th, I believe at 7:30 p.m., we'll be doing a podcast, or actually a webinar with CSAwesome. So there will be details in the description box below about how to get signed up for that. And I'll keep the product updates super short for this week. The big thing that you'll notice that exists in Coding Rooms that didn't exist previously was the ability to set templates, code templates for your classrooms. So I see Barry nodding about that. So that's been a highly requested feature. And so we did roll it out into production last week, and we hope that you've enjoyed using it. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching, and we hope to see you again next week. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.